Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's Bax here. Welcome to the channel. Here, my first ever video. Basically, we'll get right into it. This is a class project for me. I'm a junior at Southern Wesleyan University, media comm major, and I love just talking about sports, basketball, football, baseball, you name it. And I'm even a soccer athlete here at Southern Wesleyan. And this is a class project. Teacher said, you can either film your debates, debating stuff like politics and economics and stuff like that, or you can make YouTube videos talking about whatever you want, persuading people about whatever you want. So I picked the YouTube route. I picked to talk about sports here. And my first video here today is the NFL QB bracket. So basically, for those who don't know, this was kind of a crazy year for the NFL and starting quarterbacks. There were 66 starting quarterbacks. So I put it into a bracket, a 64-team bracket, kind of like March Madness. They got 64 teams, and then you got the play-ins. But since there's 66 quarterbacks, I had to have the two play-in QBs, and those are Aaron Rodgers versus Clayton Tune, and Jeff Driscoll versus Carson Wentz. So it's ranked based on passing yardage. So the highest overall seed is Tua Tagovailoa, the Miami Dolphins, because he had the most yardage. And then those guys I just mentioned, Rodgers, Clayton Tune, Jeff Driscoll, Carson Wentz, those are guys that pass for, in some cases, like Aaron Rodgers, did not complete a single pass on the year, and then Driscoll and Wentz, and then they completed very little passes. So it's seeded based like that. You got the four different, I got my bracket right here. That's what I'm looking at, guys. So when I look over to my right, that's what I'm looking at, my notes and my bracket. So I got it all organized into a bracket, and we're going to use that to determine the best quarterback from the 2023 season. So let's get right into the video. Starting off with the play-in games, Aaron Rodgers versus Clayton Tune. That's not really, we won't spend a whole lot of time on the play-in teams because those are kind of mid. Aaron Rodgers, obviously a better quarterback than Clayton Tune. So I got to go with him, but that's not really going to matter much because I got to go with Tua over those two. And then on the other side, Jeff Driscoll, Carson Wentz. That's Carson Wentz, probably the better quarterback, but just like that, not a whole lot of sample size from this year. So this bracket is based on this year only. It's not based on past seasons, your full career, potential Hall of Fame, potential Super Bowls. It's based on who was the best quarterback this year. And I'm filming this January 29th, so the day after the NFC and AFC championships. So that is taken into consideration. The playoff seeding is based on regular season passing yardage, but the whole bracket is based off your whole season for 2023, 2024. So we got those out the way. I'm going to put in now like the bracket for the first round. Then we'll jump into just like some of the best matchups. We'll do that round by round by round until we get to our champion. So starting with the first round, a pretty good matchup here, a pretty close matchup to start off in the top left of the bracket. Kenny Pickett, Nick Mullins. Kenny Pickett of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Nick Mullins of the Minnesota Vikings. And I went with Nick Mullins here. Only 700 less yards, but 200 fewer attempts than Kenny Pickett here this year and 7 less games. And he did have a higher QBR as well. He's very much a gunslinger. We saw that in some of those games late on with the Vikings, most notably that last Lions game. He had some struggles taking care of the ball there, but also some bright moments making throws down the field. A lot of INTs. But Kenny Pickett, only 6 touchdowns, only 6 passing touchdowns this year in 12 games. And late in the season, they went to Mason Rudolph. When Kenny Pickett got hurt, Mitch Trubisky, I love my guy Mitch. I got the UNC jersey on. Sam Howell, we'll get to him later. Mitch Trubisky was not good the one game they let him start, so they went to Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph is actually really solid, and they stuck with him into the playoffs. So I got Nick Mullins just because Kenny Pickett, he kind of lost the job to Mason Rudolph late, and Nick Mullins had some really bright spots despite all the interceptions, despite the Vikings not making the playoffs. So I went with Nick Mullins there in round one. Moving down to the bracket, Kyler Murray, Joe Flacco. That's a pretty even matchup there. Kyler Murray, of course, struggling with the injury this year, and Joe Flacco coming on late, coming out of, I guess, retirement. I don't know if he was really retired, but he came on late with the Browns and led them to the playoffs. I went Joe Flacco in that one. I honestly thought that Kyler was good. I'm not a big Kyler believer. I'm not a big short quarterback believer, even though I am a Saints fan, and Drew Brees is not the tallest QB. But I'm not really a Kyler believer in general. I'm definitely not a Bryce Young believer. But I did think that Kyler was pretty good this year. 3-5 in his 8 games, but Joe Flacco 4-1 in his 4 games, and that only loss. This was in the regular season, by the way. Of course, they lost to the Texans in the playoffs, and Joe Flacco was not good that first round. 4-1 in the regular season, and that only loss was that first week that he came in and against the Rams and against a good Rams team. That was the Browns' only loss with Joe Flacco in the regular season. So I went with Joe in that one. And then moving down, Sam Howell, Tommy DeVito. Just mentioned my guy Sam. Love Sam. One of the biggest reasons I got into football, actually. And I have to go with Sam. And this is not even bias right here. Of course, I have a lot of bias with Sam and with UNC. But with this matchup alone, Sam Howell versus Tommy DeVito. Tommy DeVito had a good three-week stretch, but Sam was really good for like the first 12 weeks. So the sustained play of Sam was longer than of Tommy, and of course their bad was really bad. Sam had some really bad moments down the stretch. Tommy DeVito had some really bad moments over the stretch, but I go with Sam just because his sustained period of good play was longer than Tommy DeVito's play. And one thing I'll never forget about Sam, he led the league in passing yards for like 3 weeks. And certainly gave me something to brag about here at school with my guys. And one of the worst offensive lines in the history of the NFL with the Commanders this year. And unfortunately, they're probably going to be looking for a new quarterback coming up next year. And I guess we'll see what happens with Sam moving on. But I go Sam there in round 1 over Tommy DeVito. Moving along, Bryce Young and Mason Rudolph. That's another really close matchup here in the first round. You get a lot of those in the first round with those 8-9 matchups, 6-7 matchups. Those are really, really close, like they are in the NCAA tournament. Those are your close games. But I went Mason Rudolph here. Mason Rudolph didn't play a whole lot, so his stats are not great, but 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and a 118 QBR in those 3 regular season games. And overall, of course, we know the struggles that Bryce Young had, just 2 wins for the Panthers on the year. So despite Bryce really being the guy for all, but I think just the one game he was injured with that they started Andy Dalton. Overall, Mason Rudolph was just really solid for the Steelers, coming in as a 3rd string QB. And getting some wins late and leading the Steelers to the playoffs. A really good close to the year for the Steelers. Obviously, they didn't get the win over the Bills in a tough environment and some tough weather. But I do think it was a solid year for the Steelers. And the closing play of Mason Rudolph was a big part of that. And then a couple interesting matchups that we have in the bottom right of the bracket. We got 2 matchups in the first round of quarterbacks that are on the same team. So we got Will Levis versus Ryan Tannehill and Geno Smith versus Drew Lock. Those are both first round matchups of 2 quarterbacks that are on the same team. And I went with the guy that started late in the year, and Will Levis and Geno Smith. Drew Lock had that one great win for the Seahawks against the Eagles, but Geno Smith, another solid year for him. Not as good as last year. Did take a little bit of a step back. Seahawks didn't make the playoffs this year, but I thought Geno was really good again this year. And Will Levis showed some flashes for the Titans and showed maybe he could be the QB of the future down in Tennessee. Moving on now to the second round, a couple really good matchups. You got your 1-8-9s, your 2 seeds playing 7 seeds, and then the close ones are the 4 and 5s. And we got one of those to start off here in the top left side of our bracket. Jalen Hurts versus Gardner Minshew. Gardner not the guy to start the year for the Colts, but when A-Rich went down, Gardner actually was really solid and kept the Colts in playoff contention for most of the year really for all of the year until they lost that Saturday night game on the final week of the season to the Texans. But I just think that Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, of course, they didn't do what they wanted to do in the playoffs. They didn't get back to the Super Bowl. But Jalen Hurts, another great year for him, was in the MVP conversation for most of the year. Sort of tailed off as the Eagles tailed off, but they had a great start to the year. I think they at one point were 9-0, maybe 10-0. I didn't write that one down. I probably should have, but the Eagles were really, really good over that stretch. And I go with Jalen Hurts, and that one, of course, the tush push inflates his rushing stats and sort of declines his passing touchdowns and stuff because they've been so effective in the QB sneak and getting him into the end zone. But I go with Jalen Hurts and that one. Moving down, Sam Howell, another tight matchup for him here in the second round against Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs beat Brett Rippon in the first round. Pretty easy matchup for him to go ahead and move through. But Josh Dobbs, just kind of like Tommy DeVito against Sam Howell. Sam's sustained good play was longer than Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs was good for like 2 weeks with the Cardinals. And then another like 2 weeks with the Vikings after they first traded for him. But really, once defenses started to figure out him with his new playbook, him with his new wide receivers, it was not good after that point. So I go with Sam Howell here again. Sam Howell, I did his little spiel in the first round, but I do think that the same kind of point stands, is that Sam was good enough for long enough to knock off Tommy DeVito and Josh Dobbs, but he won't move on past the second round. Don't worry. This is not a UNC QB Sam Howell video. This is an NFL QB video, so the UNC bias will sort of slow down, and you guys will see. I do know ball for sure. Bax knows ball. Bax talks ball here on the channel, but I got Sam Howell moving on to the Sweet 16 here in the bracket. Our last sort of key matchup here in the second round, two guys or one guy that we sort of talked about in the last round, Geno Smith versus Russell Wilson. Russ going up against his former team's new quarterback is a really tight matchup. Geno Smith and Russell Wilson, they're even in games. Russ leads in TD to interception ratio and QBR, and the teams had pretty even success overall. Neither team made the playoffs. The Seahawks were 9-8. The Broncos were 8-9, but it really is just overall, it kind of felt like Geno was more steady. Russ had the really bad start to the year. They got blown out by the Dolphins, had a lot of losses. They looked to be one of the teams that might be tanking for Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, but then they sort of started to click some things into gear, and then they tailed back off at the end of the year, losing to the Patriots. And that really was the end of it for Russ. They went to, I don't even remember who they started the last week. Of the 66 starting quarterbacks this year, there was a lot of them in there. But I just thought Geno was more steady overall. Russ had probably the higher highs, but also for sure the lower lows this year. So I went Geno Smith with this second round matchup to move on to the Sweet 16. Now, third round, Sweet 16, second weekend action, as you would call it in college basketball. Starting off, Tua and Jalen Hurts in the top side of our bracket. I got Tua moving on there. Matt Stafford, CJ Stroud. This is another really fun matchup here in the Sweet 16. The numbers would say CJ already. CJ in his rookie year, one of the best rookie years we have ever seen. And Matt Stafford, obviously a veteran now, got the Super Bowl win a couple years ago with the Rams. The loss in the first round this year to the Lions. Texans beating the Browns in the first round this year with the Lions. And I went CJ Stroud here in this one. As I said, one of the best QB seasons we've ever seen out of a rookie, and just 6 interceptions. That's insane for a rookie QB to have just 6 interceptions in his first season. Of course, went that streak. I can't remember if he broke the record or tied the record for most games without an interception to start for a rookie quarterback. And even despite that, Stafford just one more touchdown, but CJ had a higher completion percentage, higher passing yards, and higher QBR. So I went CJ there, and that one, of course, they got the playoff win. Really bright future for CJ. Love watching him play, and for the Texans with all the young guys they've got, Will Anderson and Derek Stingley on the defensive side of the ball, and then Nico Collins and Tank Dell with CJ Stroud on the offensive end. That's going to be a team that's going to be pretty good for a while now. And then now another big-time matchup here in the Sweet 16, and probably if it weren't for some of the lack of passing yards for Lamar Jackson, because that rushing offense was so good, you probably could see this as a championship or as a Final Four matchup. But Lamar Jackson was a 4 seed because he didn't have that many passing yards. So he's going up against Josh Allen here in the Sweet 16. So Lamar versus Josh Allen, a really fun matchup here in this one. And I went Lamar Jackson. Obviously, Josh Allen had another great end to the year. Like them, they did have some rocky spots mixed in. Of course, Josh with the turnovers, with the interceptions and the fumbles. But Lamar Jackson, the MVP here this year. Josh actually had 700 more passing yards and 5 more TDs. But Lamar did cancel that out with the 821 more rushing yards, plus 10 more rushing touchdowns. Or excuse me, actually Josh Allen had 10 more rush touchdowns because the Ravens would sort of go to Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, or throw it to Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers in the red zone. But the Bills, like the Eagles, they went with the QB sneak, and that was actually really effective for them down the stretch. And Josh Allen, a super powerful runner there in the end zone. Lamar overall more yards, but Josh Allen more touchdowns. And those turnovers, I talked about it right at the start of this matchup, but 18 turnovers, 18 interceptions for Josh Allen, just 7 interceptions for Lamar Jackson. And I go with the edge to the MVP in the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson. The other matchup there in that bracket, Sam Howell, Brock Purdy. Obviously Sam Howell, great run for him, great run for my guy. But Brock Purdy and the 49ers going to the Super Bowl. Brock Purdy, say what you want about Brock Purdy. He's been very, very successful as a second-year player at Mr. Relevant, the whole story. Going to the NFC Championship game last year, getting hurt. Now he's got his chance at the Super Bowl, and we'll see what he's got in a couple weeks. To the other side of the bracket now, Jared Goff and Derek Carr. Derek Carr, a pretty solid run, knocking off Mason Rudolph and Jarrett Stidham, but he falls to the Lions, Jared Goff. Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love. Jordan Love in his first season starting for the Packers, a great year for him. Trevor Lawrence was banged up. The Jaguars sort of took a step back, didn't make the playoffs this year, so I got Love over him. Got Dak over Geno, and then Patrick Mahomes over Baker. Baker, a good run for Baker as well as the Bucs made the playoffs, and Baker knocking out the Eagles. So another good year for Baker Mayfield, one of the more interesting players, and certainly a chance at comeback player of the year. That one's, as I said, filming this on Monday, I think the day before the award ceremony, if I'm not mistaken. If not, it's coming up for sure. But Baker in that category, along with Joe Flacco and, of course, DeMar Hamlin for comeback player of the year. But now moving on to the Elite Eight. Tua Tagovailoa, C.J. Stroud to start us off. And I went Tua. The run for C.J. Stroud ends here. Of course, a great rookie year, but Tua and the Dolphins, just a high-octane offense. A really fun team to watch with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, the 2 running backs, Raheem Mostert and Devin Achane. A really, really good regular season for the Dolphins until that last stretch. They sort of tailed off as the weather got colder. Say what you want to about the Dolphins and losing to the Bills in that makeshift AFC North or AFC East championship game. And then losing to the Chiefs in the cold weather in the first round. But I do have Tua over C.J. Stroud here in the Elite Eight. Great year for Tua. Staying healthy, which was a big thing for him. So happy to see him do that. Hopefully he'll do the same in next year, and the Dolphins can sort of keep up with that fun offense down there in Miami. And down to the Elite Eight of the bottom left, Lamar and Brock Purdy. We saw that matchup late in the regular season, and Lamar was amazing in that regular season matchup. Brock Purdy, not so much. He was actually pretty bad in that matchup, but Lamar Jackson just so awesome in that matchup. So awesome overall. And before that matchup, they were pretty much even in terms of the odds for the MVP race, but then Lamar knocking off Brock Purdy head-to-head and then sort of cementing himself as the league's MVP here this year. I got him moving on over Brock Purdy. Over to the right side, Jared Goff and Jordan Love. I got Jared Goff here. Jordan Love, great run, and just like C.J. Stroud, kind of a rookie, not really a rookie, but first year starting, winning a playoff game. Great season for Jordan Love, but Jared Goff and the Lions overall just a better year. Better offense overall. Great year for the Packers. Not a good defense. Lions in their own right don't really have a good defense, but just some of the stuff that Jared Goff did with those targets, with Amon-Ra St. Brown, with Jahmyr Gibbs, passing out the backfield with Sam Laporta, another great rookie tight end out of Iowa. Just a great year for Jared Goff. One of his best years, honestly, maybe his best year other than that Super Bowl run with the Rams in 2019. Probably one of Jared Goff's best years here this year, and a great guy. Good to see him doing good things. Lions are a really fun team to watch. Unfortunately, last night, just a really, really tough choke. And actually, went out in November, back when I went to a Browns game with some of my buddies, I put in a future for the Lions to win the Super Bowl. And I was texting them at halftime. Of course, the Lions up 17. I'm like 90 minutes away from the Super Bowl ticket cashing. And then we get the second half from the Lions. And then I feel like a loser. No, of course, not as much as Detroit fans, but certainly sucks to see him go out like that, but a really fun year for Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions. Dak and Pat Mahomes in the bottom right. I got Pat Mahomes. Dak, a really, really solid year for Dak. And just some of the late season stuff, the loss in the first round to the Packers was not good. Dak was not good in that one. I have a walking joke with one of my friends that's a Cowboys fan. I call him Dak Poop Scott. And he was not Dak Poop Scott for most of the regular season, which is why he ended up as a 1 seed here in this bracket. But that playoff game against the Packers, he was Dak Poop Scott 100%. So I got Pat Mahomes. Moving on to the Final Four. And in our Final Four, we got Tua, Lamar, and then Goff and Pat Mahomes. So starting us off, Tua Tagovailoa and Lamar Jackson. I got Lamar Jackson moving on over Tua. Of course, Ravens getting to the AFC Championship. Dolphins losing in the first round. Lamar, the MVP. Got to have him moving on over Tua. And then on the other side of the bracket, got Pat Mahomes, Jared Goff. Like I said, great year for Jared Goff, great year for the Lions. But it's Pat Mahomes. It's one of the most talented quarterbacks we have ever had without a good wide receiver room, and we'll talk about that in the championship matchup. But I got Pat Mahomes moving on over Jared Goff. And in our championship game, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. The matchup that we got yesterday, of course, the Chiefs knocking off the Ravens to move on, and I got the same. I got Patrick Mahomes knocking off Lamar Jackson. Patrick Mahomes, my champion of the bracket. The matchup we saw yesterday, as I just said, Lamar was really, really good in the regular season. The very, very deserved MVP of the league, and he'll get crowned that very soon. But it's really just hard to deny and really hard to say anything bad about Pat Mahomes. Man, another great year for Pat Mahomes. His statistics are not as high as they had been over the past couple of years because that receiving room was so bad. And even Travis Kelce had a couple of drop-offs, or had drops, and had a drop-off in the regular season. But now in the playoffs, Kelce is back to the man that we had seen in those Super Bowl runs, and he was great in the playoffs so far. And the Chiefs as a whole, a great run here to the Super Bowl. And you got to give credit to Patrick Mahomes, never giving up on those quarterbacks, or on those wide receivers, excuse me. Did have a lot of things to say about the refs, notably so about the refs, but he never said anything bad about those receivers. He never went publicly to complain about those guys. He stuck with them, let Rashee Rice develop as a rookie, and boy, has he turned into a really, really good receiver. Let MVS do his thing, be the deep ball guy. Let Travis Kelce sort of adjust to his newfound lifestyle, and then turn it on in the playoffs. And now here we are with the Chiefs. And I got Patrick Mahomes winning the 2023 QB bracket here. Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback of the year so far. And I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Lots more videos to come here, talking about not just football. We'll talk about some basketball, NBA, college basketball. As we get closer to baseball, we'll talk some MLB. We'll talk everything here on Bax Talks Balls. Hope you like the video. Drop a like, comment, subscribe, whatever you do. Ring the bell, and we'll see you next week here on Bax Talks Ball.